the various ways you build a model and all those things. Here in this session, more concentration would be on how we develop application uh, on Power 9 systems. Basically, till now we have seen, right, the software methods and all those things. So at the end of the day, as you aware, all these algorithms, what we write, at the end of the day would be running on an hardware, right? So the performance what we get is as good as its hardware. So when we actually teach compiler design and assemblers and all those things, right, the power that we derive is as good as its software. So we do have the software nowadays, the various frameworks, and at the end of the day, it is run on the hardware, and the research is still going on. How do we actually get the hardware capability hardware capability, and then how we can optimize. So these are the things that is going on, and you have seen what we have uh, seen in the personal PC world, right? So the advantages, the advancements in the desktop processor actually it reached the zenith, and then now we don't talk about more about the how many gigahertz speed the processor is, but instead we focus on more on the how many cores we have. So basically we ourselves have changed the from the clock rate to the number of cores, right? The same thing happens here, happening in the server world also. And open power, we get more number of cores. At the same time, the exchange between subsystems that what we build can reduce the communication over it. So we'll see. So that's the reason people actually tend to use more open power based hardware uh, compared to normal GPUs, normal only GPUs. So because you reduce the communication over it with NVLink. Okay, so the basic idea of the session is to introduce about the deep learning framework. It would be a very basic introduction. I will not be touching the it started today on either TensorFlow or PyTorch, but I assume that these are the things that is general life cycle will look. And then there are two problems that I am going to show. So one is on diabetic retinopathy and then COVID-19, right? So let us see how do we do deep learning application development. So this is a typical ML pipeline we have, right? So when we talk about the pipeline, as you know, as you're aware, right? So basically, given a data set, what we do, first we do the data pre-processing, and then once we do the data pre-processing, we will actually try to build a machine learning model. And then once we build a machine learning model, then and then we do the inference, we deploy it, and then we do the inference. And the model building is not a like it is not a very simple task. In fact, we do have a set of algorithms, and the procedures are very same, right? You split your data into training set and test set. You train using one of the algorithms, and then you do the cross validation in the other data set, and then you see how good your model fits, and then based on that you figure it out, various options, right? You can have, for a same problem you can have multiple models, but you figure it out based on the accuracy. So what is my accuracy I'm getting? That might be one candidate for decision. Other one would be how fast my inference is, if I am targeting embedded systems and all those things where the speed is more important. So it depends. So at the end of the day, this is not a single operation, right? It is a series of operations, and this series of operations we generally call it a pipeline, right? You divide into set of states, and then once you have for each state you accomplish one task and then move on. and at the end of the day, it's an end to end. So you have the number of stages, and then you have a data, your input data, and then you get your algorithm, and which you will deploy, which is actually different than our traditional software programming, right? So there we have an input, and we know a lot of things, right? So we know how what is the logic, and then we will go and implement it, right? And then we finally get a program that works as we coded. But here it is not the case. It is by the data, the algorithm will figure out the patterns, and this is a essential difference. So the pipelines are the one of the distinguished features of machine learning development. So one is the data pipeline. You take a data pipeline, and then you develop, you build, you train, you find candidate models, and then you validate it. And once, if you, with that validation, you use those feedback, and then you go back and retrain. So this is a typical cycles, a typical feedback loop we generally follow in machine learning. And then you can actually have model management systems or ML ops. So you can actually use there are a lot of open source software that are available for doing the ML ops also. Okay, so and then you finally deploy, and then once you deploy, your job is not done. So you keep on monitoring it, because when we deploy, right, most of the time the model we deploy works on the unseen data, so on the new data, not on the old data. So then, as you know, accuracy or the model performance in the training is not only the yardstick. We do have a lot of things, and this is what it is. So you see how good your model is in the production. So this is a typical ML pipeline, and these are the very well-known frameworks we can use to build our deep learning software, right? So Cafe 2, Chiner, PyTorch, and Microsoft Cognitive Toolkit, and then we have a TensorFlow. You have Torch, MXNet from Amazon, and then they have a SageMaker. So and then you can do your machine learning with MATLAB also. So these are the typical frameworks we actually use it for developing applications. And most of the time, if you see, right, academicians prefer to use PyTorch, and generally industry people use TensorFlow. So it depends, and there is no standard saying that okay, you should only use TensorFlow or you should use PyTorch. It depends. It depends on uh, our requirements, right? So, and then before going further, let us try to understand the cloud computing. The reason why I'm coming here is I want to introduce this edge devices also, because edge is a future. And before we go for edge computing, uh, we will see how what is a cloud computing. So cloud computing, as you know, it is nothing but renting out the resources, right? At the end of the day, we all know, right? We if for example, in my building, if I could construct the ground floor and the first floor, what I would do is I would live in ground floor, and I will rent out the first floor, right, to earn revenue for me. The same thing, the same idea, uh, the same idea is actually utilized by the companies like Amazon and Google. They have a lot of processing capacity, resources they have, but instead using it for their own, they use it for their own, and then they rent out, where the users can come and at any time can buy those resources without any obligations, right? You pay for the usage that you have done, well, you have used, and then you are done. So for the user, from the user centric perspective, you need not maintain the hardware and all those things. It is taken care by the Google. So the life is very easy, right? Similar to the hotel, right? We actually, if we are cooking at home, we have to do a lot of things. But if I'm going to an hotel, just I go and place my order, and then I get whatever I required by just paying money. The same thing happens here in the cloud also, right? So you go and get the resources, and these resources can be an application, it can be a platform, or it can be an infrastructure. And based on that, we have SaaS for application, and then platform as a service, and then the virtual machines, we call it as an infrastructure as a service. Okay, and before we go for diabetic retinopathy using just a nanoboard, let us briefly look what the edge computing is. So we have seen cloud computing, right? So cloud, the resources are actually deployed. It will be in the service provider premises, and then the users has to use it. But in the edge, what happens is that if we keep everything at the cloud, right, there might be sometimes that the delay would be higher. Like for example, I do have my IoT devices, and it like for example, Apple, it wants to connect to Apple Cloud every time. What happens is that it has to go and reach it has to connect to data Apple data center. So that connection time would be uh, would see would be slow, or it may be fast. And we know that internet is a best effort service, right? So what happens is that there's no guarantee of its performance. So obviously we might experience delays. So the idea is, instead of going everything to cloud, why can't we keep some kind of operations near to the customer premise, where we would do local processing there itself, and then in this way we can actually reduce the load on the cloud. At the same time, we can improve the power delay. So that's the idea. Because if you see the growth of end devices, right, it is actually it's actually and more than an exponential. It is out of control. How many see those are the devices that we could not imagine have the capability to connect today, right? People are telling, okay, even the scooters, they are telling that they have a Bluetooth. So those are the things that is happening. And then the number of devices that are active in the internet is also increasing exponentially. So you need to have an edge to get better performance, and this motivated for an edge AI. So basically, you do artificial intelligence or machine learning at the edge. And if you see the Gartner hype cycle, you could see that it is a lot of innovation has been triggered, and probably within another decade, probably by next decade, edge AI will reach the productivity state. And there are a lot of use cases. And what is those use cases? What is its motivation? So if you see here, right, today's AI computing. So today we are actually talking about the cloud computing. Whatever the models we train will go to the cloud, and then the cloud would will generate model, right? So it's a cloud that is it's a cloud centric processing. But when we talk about an edge computing, it is more distributed in nature, right? Local training or local inference happens, and then not everything will go for cloud. Only few parts would actually go for cloud. For example, our Google keyboards. Okay, these are the this is an example of tomorrow's AI model. For example, as you aware, whatever new words we type, right? It builds a local model in on our phones, and then all those models would be the incremental models would be sent to the cloud server there in Google, and there it would build a global model, and then it will push to users. So that is how you could see in your um, Google keyboard that a lot of new vernacular words appears. Okay, so it is not like it's not like other earlier, right? So if few of them, if more people use those words, it will quickly come as a predictive text because of this reason. So, and the edge devices, what we are talking about is the Jetson nanoboards and the Google Edge TPUs. Both are very familiar. And then if you see Jetson nanoboard, it is very affordable. So basically, for a 10,000 rupees, you get a Jetson nano board where you actually as around 100 cores to do machine learning. So our diabetic project actually runs on Jetson Nanoboard. Unfortunately, we can show it on the server, but Jetson Nanoboard we could not connect it for some technical issue for that for this meeting. Otherwise. Still it is possible. So whatever the model that I am going to discuss on the diabetic uh, recognition is actually deployed on this kind of Jetson Nano board. What we have done is we have done the training on training on the server and then deployed it on the board. Okay, so that's the reason I wanted to show this one. And then this is a similar. Typically, even the Google has edge TPUs. This is a tensor processing units. So they call it an tensor processing units, and basically the idea is to give the hardware level support for running the training and inference. Okay, so let us start. Let's look into the diabetic retinopathy. So basically, the diabetic retinopathy is nothing but looking is to find the level of diabetes based on the retina image. So based on the retina image, based on the eyes, we will make a classification in what kind of what stage of diabetes the patient is in. So as we know, there are 5 categories of diabetes: no DR, mild, moderate, severe, and proliferative DR, diabetic retinopathy. So the idea is, okay, can we try to classify the diabetic level solely on retina image? This is a question that we asked ourselves, and we started working on that. Um, so how did we approach? This is our solution. This is our solution overview. First, we took the high resolution labeled image set. Okay, see, resolution plays a key important role because it's an image, right? And the more resolution you have, the better details you capture in the image. Okay, so more clarity, and then the higher resolution images will help to find a lot of invisible features. Okay, so that's the reason we have taken high resolution label data image set. And the downside of high resolution is that it requires tremendous processing power, and that's the one reason why we went to power 9 servers. Okay, so we, so the idea is that's the reason we actually went to power 9 servers. So you have the high resolution data set, and then we wanted to work on that, and we required GPU capabilities, and then lot of things. So and then after high resolution image, we did image pre-processing and data augmentation, and then labeling data, right? And one thing what we have done is compared to others, see, when we do have that images, right, we what we did was we actually spoke with we pulled a couple of doctors, and then we actually asked them to help us in labeling the data. And if you see, you might ask me why we are actually here to why there was a need of doctors. But doctors, the idea is very simple. See, as you know, in machine learning, we develop the algorithm will figure it out the patterns, and the doctors are the subject matter experts, right? By just looking into images, we cannot actually tell whether it is really diabetic or not. There are other factors also, but the doctors would, if they do the labeling would be most of the time would be correct, right? Because they do carry domain expertise, and with such a high quality labeled data, the model you generated, a model you developed, generated can be easily deployed with very few errors. So that's the reason when we do machine learning, right, it is very important to rope people in that domain for labeling. If it's an unlabeling, fine, but still we have to talk with domain experts, because even the unlabeled data, when we have an unlabeled data, we get clusters and all those things, and without having that domain knowledge, it is very easy, very difficult to difficult to understand the models. So it is very necessary to go and talk with domain experts, and then get the data argumentation by labeling it, and then we did the system model training on Power 9. And once we build the trained model, we actually uh, went to the Jetson Nano board and deployed on it, and then we started running on it. We started inferencing. So we use a Jetson Nano board for inferencing. So you take the model, you build it, whatever the model that we got it in Power on the Power 9 system. We took that model and deployed on the Jetson Nano board, and then we connected the Retina image capturing device with the Jetson Nano board, and then we did the inference. That's the reason you see two arrows here, right? So one is on the right side and one is upside, right? So on the one is one access input. Here what happens is the image in the retina image capturing device, it would tell if you use that connected to just a nanobot, it would tell it will write it will generate some number based on that inference. So that's the reason it is true. And then this is the and another thing is that inferencing, you can do it on the cloud, right? So either you can actually write a web application that can be done even with the simple Python servers, which would take it. So you can spawn a Python server in the on the Power 9 server, and then still you can send that one inferencing to that server. Okay, so that can be done. It is not necessary, or you can actually deploy it on the Jetson Nano boards, or you can do it on your mobiles also. This is how the solution. This is how our solution looks like, and we had taken around 35,000 images and labeled it, and the data processing what we have done is primarily image rotations, and then removing the noise, and then we had an hardware of Power 9 systems with 4 Tesla V100 GPUs, and believe me, this is a G beast. And the generated models are deployed on Jetson nanoboards, and then we had a, as I told earlier, Retina image capturing device that captured the image and sent the image to the cloud or the local device. Okay, so this is what our actual implementation is, and then we use it CNN for training 35,000 labeled retina images, and we use VGG16 network architecture, and then so what we did was, after with original 35,000 images, we augmented it to 1 lakh images, and then out of that 20% we have used it for validation, and we have trained it to 50 epochs to get around 97% accuracy. And there is no limit. You can keep on increasing your epochs. It is like see, what happens is that when you build a model, right, that you need to have set some epochs for training, and it is not fixed. For example, we cannot answer a question like how much epochs is good for my model, and it is solely based on your experience. So the more you see, because some models will converge faster, you would when we talk about convergence, you would see the accuracy will not improve much after a few epochs. Then you can think, okay, you have attained the saturation point, right? So there are those are the thumb rules, but not formal way where you will tell, okay, my I would 50 epochs is enough for me, or 10 epochs or 100. So still is an open question, and then you can actually get the code in our GitHub, in the repository which is hosted in GitHub. Okay, so this will I will so I will briefly go and show the what we have for this diabetic. So this is the code that we have. So this is a retinopathy code, and this is actually connected to the uh, server. Okay, so we have used TensorFlow and Keras. So basically, you can see that the first we have initialized with the label and what are these class. So basically, we have used the TensorFlow here, and then how many classes we have, what is the width and height of the images, what is the depth, right? So you need to specify the input shape, and then we here we are actually initializing it to epochs. Like we have taken 15, and then initial learning rate, and then the batch size. So batch size typically depends on the number of GPUs and data. So we had 4 GPUs, and then and then we have chosen 32. You can still choose 64 or 128, but as you actually take as you increase batch size, right, you need to have that capability. Uh, you need to have those kind of capability in your hardware. Okay. Otherwise, what happens is that see, at the end of the day, we what we do, we take the data, and then we proceed parallelly, right? So the more GPUs you have, you can achieve better number. And other thing is that as you increase the batch size, right, your training becomes faster, but your accuracy might dip. This is my experience from semantic segmentation. The idea is very simple. The more faster you want to process, you would lose accuracy. So that is extremely fine. And then you take then you read the training data. So here it is a you take uh, you take the image, you load the image here, and then you take the dimensions. Uh, you look for any error in those dimensions, and then you load it. Okay. So once you load it, once you load the images, then you train the you want to train the you have to build the CSV. And what we have done is here we first take the patient ID, and then we we actually, if you take here, right, so we take the patient, we generate the patient ID, and then we have added the image level hash also. So we would link the images. So basically what happens is that when we have a patient ID, right, so you do have for the left and right eye, right? So it should match the. So we want to know how many images where both left and eye level are matching, and how many are not matching, right? So this is what we actually use for the random for the training. Because when you get a data, right, the data is not common across everywhere. So that's the reason we need to be very sure to handle these kind of things. Okay. And then we start to read we just want to print how many images we have. So at every time we have the image, and then we have a level, and then we have a patient ID. Okay. So we had around the data set for around 17,000 patients, and 17,000 patients into two, which is around 35,000 images. Okay. So we just wanted to get the patient IDs, and then this is the data that we have, and then we converted that hash to the data frame. Once we have that data frame, what we did was we 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 just wanted to plot that image. So, and then finally we started to convert that classes, and then so basically we did the data cleaning here. If you see here, right? So you create the partition of the data into 70, 75, and then 25%, and then you take the information, you generate the information, the unique patients in the data frame, and then you split the data set, okay, to you split the training and testing data set, and then we train it, okay. So these are the information that we have added for ourselves, and then you train the actual code for training, okay. So we take this training x and training y, and then what we do is we actually construct the generator for data augmentation, right? And then finally this is the model that we have created. So this is the VGG16. Okay, so you can actually look into it. Basically, it does the um, convolution and then ReLU, and it uses it uses the ReLU as activation, and then final output we use softmax. Okay, so this is the model that we have, and then in case of reshaping, if it required, we'll do that, and then we compile, and then we print the summary. So if you see here, right? So it is a convolution 2D. This has around 896 parameters. We have maximum pooling. So basically, we had a total parameters of around 65 lakh parameters, and trainable parameters is also the same. And this is the model we had. So this is a visualization of the model that we have used, okay. And then you train the network for required epochs. So if you see here, right, we have trained it for 15. So we could see that as we increase the epochs, uh, the validation accuracy is also increasing, right? So by around 15, we actually wrote it back, we saved it to the disk, and then this is the plot that we have generated. So the red one is a training loss, and then the blue one is a validation loss, okay. So training accuracy and validation accuracy we will not use, but this is a testing when you do the testing. So this is how we have implemented, and this model we have deployed on the Jetson Nano board. So then we try to and for that deployment we need to convert the Keras model to the uh, TF model, because Jetson Nano board runs TF Lite. Okay, so that's the reason we wanted to successfully convert into TF model, and after that, what we did was there was some fix we did, and then we generated once again with the TensorFlow, and then finally we implemented on the TensorRT, and this was deployed on the Jetson Nano board, and this is the code for inference here. If you see here, right, so you load the model here, okay. So whatever the model that we have created from they were generated by training in the Power9 system, we actually loaded it we loaded here, and then all the images that we have, what we have seen for the new images that we have, what we did was we would actually use the, see here, model predict classes. We give that image, and then the model will predict us whether which class it is. So if it predicts as 0, then it has no DR, and if it is 1, it is mild, and if it is 2, it is moderate, and if it is 3, it is severe. So similarly, so this is the way we actually do the inference. So whenever we write an application, the first part is a training, the second part is inference. So when we are doing inference, it is not necessary that we would be using the same images that what we have given for the training. It is not, and it should not be used. So if you have a data set, and to data set, what you do is you can take keep few things, few images for your inference testing also. So better it is to divide it randomly, so that you can mimic that functionality of inference also. So yes, dividing it to two parts is splitting is two parts is fine, but adding another split and using for inference will not hurt anything. But instead, it will give you an overview, because at the end of the day, inference would be on the unknown data. So you can gauge how your model work with respect to inference. Okay. And then we have generated the graph model. Any questions on this application? Any questions? Okay. See, when we talk about candidate model, see, let us take this simple example here. Let us go back here in this example only. Here we have used a model called VCG, okay, VGG, sorry, VGG 16. And you can use another model also. For example, if you have ResNet, you can still use ResNet also. So in my problem, I can use VGG, or I can use ResNet, or I can use any other type of models. And these things are the candidates. So what I mean to say is, you can actually have more than one solution for a typical machine learning or deep learning application. So those models, the which are probably the solution, are called as candidate models. Okay, so I hope this is clear. If you don't have any question, then I would the uh, go back to the next application. Okay. So let us we did development, we did tested few things on COVID-19, and here are our experiences. So as we know, it is one of the deadly virus, and most of us are working from home from past uh, no, more than a year, right? So the trend of work from home has become very common from last 1.5 years, thanks to coronavirus, and it is one of the most deadly virus. And unfortunately, each one of us are directly or indirectly are sufferers. So, but apart from that, so the question that what we thought was, okay. Okay, it's a pandemic time. So can we actually thought, okay, can we, and one of the problem we had was detecting, right? You had to either go to RT-PCR, or you use swab, right? So those are the two ways. But the idea was, okay, people were using the corona to detect the corona from the X-ray images, because MRI scans, right? MRI scan, using MRI scans, you actually can, most of the time you can get, okay, what is the severity and all those things. So what we thought was, okay, if we get catch hold of few positive cases with X-ray images, can we build ML models to do the job? That's what our idea is. So for that, what we did was this is a motivation, right? So basically, if you take an X-ray images, right? So what we are seeing is an MRI scan, but here it is an X-ray image. So can we actually look into the lung infection? Basically, when there is an infection, you can see the lot of uh, dense patterns in the images, right? So using this, can we actually try to find, label it, and then try to find any correlation between X-ray? That's the motivation we had, and this is the application flow we had with COVID. So the first what we did was we developed the UI and server using Python. So specifically, Python Flask is used for developing server, and for UI either you can use Python Flask or Django framework. Nowadays using Django framework is pretty straightforward, and so getting a Python server is a straight way. It is very easy. You can we can get it in within an hour. So the idea is very simple. As a user, you enter into the system by providing your credentials, and then we do authentication, and the authentication will not propagate till server. Instead it would actually localized one. So basically it happens at the UI end only, and then the user basically the user would upload that image, and this image is sent to the server, where as we've seen the server that this application would do the model inferencing, and it would send the inference result and base 64 encoding of the image to the this Python application client, and then it is displayed on the browser. So this is the idea we had, and this is a high level idea we had. So let us see the code now. So this is the code base we have. So we got our data set, and if it is if you take these images, right, this is a simple image of the COVID person with the COVID. Okay, this is how the image, the X-ray image looks like. You can see the lot of infections here, uh, and then if you take so just a couple of examples, so that the idea what we have taken is that if you take a lot of images, right, your training you would better training. And also here if you see, right, uh, day one, so for example we have taken the continuous one also, right? So here it is a day one, day zero, and then fourth. Okay, how the how it changes, and then day seventh, right? If you see here, right, it is without during the very initial lung infection during corona, uh, and then after 4 days it looks like you can see the lot of dense gray dense images here, uh, the area. And here after they started some medication, still it is there. So if you see, these are the ones that these kind of heterogeneous data, right, which actually help us to build better models. So this is the data set we had for the COVID. And what we did was we took the normal. See, it is very important for us to tell uh, the normal one also. So because we are training the algorithm, okay. So for training, it is we need to tell the two extremes. And theoretically what happens is that we try to build an hyperplane between the uh, COVID positive and COVID non-positive, right? So if you see, if you theoretically what happens that you have an region, so we want to build a boundary, and that boundary we call it as an hyperplane. So and this for doing that you need to give not only the COVID positive images, but normal users, normal healthy people's lung images also, so that the algorithm will try to bring they develop the right boundaries. Okay, so that's very much essential. So especially when we doing the classification task. So when we generally have the classification task, apart from MNST, right? They do have different class, right? So you need to have, like, for example, binary is one, like 0 or 1. So you need to provide both the cases. They can think it as a two classes, class A and class B, where class A is a positive and then class B is non-positive. You give those two kind of images and build your model so that the algorithm will try to come up with its own prediction, classification. Okay, so this was a data set we did. For example, let me see. This is a normal one, right? So, and here what happens is that you need to, so when we are especially working on this medical field, right, we need to take the data set as a representation for different age groups and different genders and all those things, because what happens is that if you train your application only with the COVID positive, only with a specific gender or a specific age group, then obviously it will introduce bias in your model. So for that, we need to spread the bias. What we do is we take images from all the population, so which represents the different age groups, different genders, different ethnicity, and all those things. The more diversified data you have, especially on these kind of medical applications, you get better models. Okay. Otherwise, it would introduce bias, and at the same time, what happens is that it is unexplainable to, and we cannot understand why we are seeing uh, such a behavior. For example, as we know that the mortality rate varies across the states, right? Some states have higher and some states have lower. So when you have those kind of data, like from one person from one state and image from the some other person, that will diversify, and then that will help to reduce the biases. So that's the reason it is extremely important we take the data across the population. Okay, and this is a data set that we what we have seen, and then this is the actual code, and this is a model that we have generated. But so once again, these are the first part is nothing but the necessary packages, and then you have the how many GPUs that you have, and then we initialize it with initial run rate. You have a epochs, and then you load the images, and then you loop over the image path, and then you convert the data to numpy arrays, and then finally you partition it. You initialize the training data augmentation object, and then you take here also we have used VGG16 network, and you can and we have used the ImageNet weights. Okay, you can use different one also, and then we compiled our model, and then these are training epochs that we have generated, and then we did the prediction. So these are the various scores we have, and then we have computed the confusion matrix, and then this is a plot that we have got. Okay, and then we have saved it. Let us try to run this one. Okay. Okay, so this is I would be I have actually what I have done is I've connected to the server. Okay, so connected to the Power9 server. So just wanted to let you know. So whatever the code that I'm running is directly working on that server. Okay. So first we will run. Okay. So and then now we will run once again the second part of the code. See, the good part about notebook is that you can write it as a block by block. Okay. And then you need not go and change once again, right? If you write a single Python script, if I want to change few things, then I need to rerun whole thing, but it is not the case with notebook. That's a good part about a notebook. Okay, so here we will start with initial rate of point 0.001 and then 25 epochs, and then the batch size is 8. Okay, so and then we load that images. So this system, what we have, consists of 4 physical GPUs and 4 logical GPUs. This is nothing but uh, uh, Power9 systems. Okay, the backend is Power9, and okay, this is executed. Okay, let us loop over the image path. Okay, and then encoding. Okay, then we will do the partitioning and then the data augmentation part. Okay, now we will we'll specify the VGC. Okay, and then we'll compile. We'll be compiling. Okay, you could see that it is taking 25 epochs, right? So this is how it happens, and then we will do the evaluate our network because we have trained it only for 25 epochs, and then we'll once again compute the confusion matrix, and then we'll plot it. What is the see? This is the graph that we are getting for 25, right? So what we do is let us go back and try to change the number of epochs to 50. Okay, so when we change here, right, we need to go restart running only on the subsequent one. There's no need for us to go back here and run it. Okay, if it was normal Python script, then we would have run once again, right? So that's a good part about notebook. So then we'll once again convert. Okay, and then we partition it, then we'll load it, compile once again, and then train it for 50, and we'll see how it would look like, and see with those kind of images how fast it is. Okay, we will evaluate. Okay, okay, and then once again we plot it. See, the training loss, the red one, the training loss keep on reducing, right? The training accuracy and the validation accuracy become more flat, right? Right, the training loss and the valuation loss keep on decreasing with the number of epochs of 50, right? So let us try to increase the batch size. Let us try to understand how it would actually change. See, that's the beauty of a notebook. You go, you use those things, and then let us change it to 16 and see how the patterns look like. We loop over. convert, we run, and then yes, we'll once again. So we'll do the prediction, right? See, you could see that the graph actually has changed with the change of batch size, right? Especially this one, right? We're still getting the validation loss is decreasing at this here, right? And then we have seen the incremental here with the increase in batch size, right? Okay, if you see here, right, the this especially for this one, not the blue one, this one, right? It was concentrated more here, and now it is spread. So what we do is once again we'll go and change. See, let us try to change the batch size. Not batch size. Probably we will change it to change the learning rate. Okay, just a experiments. Okay, so we'll just change. We will reduce the learning rate once again by we'll reduce by 10. So now we will see how the things would work. And if you see, right, the moment I increase it, decrease it, increase it, sorry, I have decreased the learning rate. So you could see the time also actually changed. Okay, okay. Then we see this one, right? Uh, this one and the printing and see by changing learning rate how the graph is behaving. So that's the reason, that's the beauty of machine learning. Most of the time when we actually take, see, if you go and tune even the parameters, right, you get different graph that we have seen, right? So compared to earlier, your training loss became is loss is at around here, and then your validation loss saturated here, and then the squares and all those things here. So that's the reason. So we call these are the things as a candidate models. Okay, so one with initial rate of 0.001, one with 0.0001, and then batch size. So these are typical parameters which we fix it before before we run the model. That we call it, and these are hyperparameters. These parameters, most of the time what happens is it is set based on the experience. Okay, there are a lot of work is going on that aspect, but still um, we do that. So still, most of the time it's more experience, more experience than the knowledge. There's a lot of work is going in the direction to make it more explainable, but still it's very less because the combinations that you generate in the with respect to hyperparameters is tremendous. So now I will change it to 100, epochs 100. I will revert it back batch size as 8. Uh, okay, so let me run it once again. So now we will see how it will change for 100 epochs. See, when we talk about epochs, right here, see, let us take this simple example. In this stage, what happens is that this took 83 milliseconds per step. Okay, the loss was 0.1147, where the accuracy what we reached was 1, and the valuation loss is 0.0759, and then the valuation accuracy. This is a training loss. It's a validation accuracy and valuation loss. Okay, I think it was done with 100 epochs. We'll see how good it is now. Okay, see how your epochs changed the changed the loss and accuracy. See, see here what we seen is right. This becomes more stable, right? With that with this batch size 8. So now we'll go and tune it to 128. You just keep it. So what I mean to say that these things are all experimental. See, the more you do experiment, you tune the parameters, your model behavior changes. So that is my intention to do this demonstration. Otherwise, what happens is that it is not like our traditional software where we would provide input and then we would be uh, we would write the code, we get the expected. Okay, there was some error. I think I missed it something. It's okay, so let me change it to 64. So sometimes what happens is that when you increase the batch size, right? So you might not have the required capacity. So that's the reason you would get these kind of things. It's fine still. So we'll change it to 32 or some other because it's a shared server. People might be some other people might be using GPUs. Still, till it is fine. So a lot of things happen. So not an issue. No. See. So if somebody is also using our GPU, because GPUs are also shared, right? So sometimes it won't work. Okay, then we will make the network. So see, with 32 batch size, this is the pattern we have got. Let us go back and see what we did was we changed the learning rate from 0.0001 to 0.004. Let us make it 1e to the power of minus 2, right? 0.01. Yeah, let us say. Okay, we'll run once again. We'll compile. Okay. Okay, training completed. Okay, so we'll see. See, this is the new pattern that we got with different one. So the idea, I think now it should be clear that machine learning is more on running hands-on, because you cannot actually, by just checking into changing one parameter, you cannot make sure how the output will be different, right? That's not the case in our traditional software engineering, right? What we do is we change some parameters or some input, and we know how it will affect the logic, or how it will affect our output. But here it is not. So that's the whole intention of this exercise. So just want to let you know the parameters like learning rate, and the batch size. Uh, these are the and then the epochs. These are called as hyperparameters or metaparameters. And the good part about these things is that it is data independent. And unfortunately, the bad side is you don't. There is no fixed rule. How much, what are the things that you need to, how to tune them. For example, you'll be surprised that you could change the optimizer inside this one also. So we can use Adam optimizer. We can actually change gradient descent with some other parameters. So there's a wide range of opportunities for building models. So that's the reason people use candidate models. So you can use the same algorithm but different parameters also, right? So in that case, what we do generally is based on one is experience. With experience, okay, this is how it will look like after you understand the uh, understand your domain, and then you try to generate few models and then try to understand why you are getting that, and then try to go back and then optimize it. So this is what I uh, um, wanted to convey. So, and this was actually running on the uh, our live server. Okay. So, any questions? So, so thank you. I'm done with my session. Let me know if you have any questions I can take. Yeah, welcome. So thank you for providing an opportunity to give a demo session on our models on Power 9, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Abhi.
Yeah.
Thank you for your informative session. I think it provides a very good knowledge and about how you can handle a deep learning concept in IBM Power Server. And I want to know in what way this IBM Power Server differs from the normal system.
Actually, the communication overhead what we have within the GPUs, right? That is actually minimized in Power 9 servers. Basically, what happens is that when we do have multiple GPUs, there will be communication overhead. Okay, but here the communication overhead is taken care by NVLink. So NVLink enables the direct communication among among those components. That's the reason you would find it as a better coordinated and better better performance. Because when we develop our distributed systems, right, it is the communication overhead is the one which is actually paramount for us, because that impacts a lot of things, and because already you are in a heterogeneous in a networking background. So one thing is outside one, the inside machine also there is a communication overhead, and Power 9 series would actually reduce those things. So it will not add. Otherwise what happens is that when you do distributed deep learning or distributed ML, already you have a communication overhead, and on top of that you will have a communication overhead within the components within the system. So
Okay, thank you, Abhi.
Yeah, thank you.
Participants, if you have any questions, you can go on with Abhi.
Or you can put the questions on the chat box also. Okay, I think there are no questions.
Okay.
So with this, we have come to the end of the session.
Madam,
Sir, here we have Dr. Agastya, HOD
BCA department.
Say a few words, please.
yes, madam. Good evening, everyone. Ma'am, am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all for this valedictory session. Actually, today is the fifth day. See, actually, we plan to conduct valedictory also. SRMIST, once again, SRMIST Ramapuram College of Science and Humanities, Department of Computer Applications, organizing 5 days online faculty industry immersion program for our own faculties and also faculties from other institutions. So, Department of Computer Applications Association with Object Automation Software Solution Private Limited, organizing this event for faculty skill development for fast 5 days. See, the faculty members have participated actively from day one. I'm watching this. I'm also one of the participants. So I'm very happy. I'm really thanks to all the participants. And I'm very grateful to Object Automation Software Solution Private Limited. We are associated with the past 2 years. The Object Automation companies signed MOU. We are associated with the past 2 years. We are very happy. We are have a real industry experience with this company. I'm also thanks to all the resource persons from Object Automation Software Company, Mr. Madan and Sesang and other Mr. Today Abhinandan, all the resource persons from Object Automation Company, and also the coordinator of the Object Automation Company. Also, I'm very thankful to that. So the session was very useful for all the participants. I hope. Is there any experience? If you are interested to share your experience, kindly mute and share your experience for the past 5 days. Participants, please.
Yes, sir. Very good evening.
Yes, sir.
This is Bharani Dharan, research scholar from BISTOS and assistant professor the New College Chennai. We have very much enjoyed and gained knowledge with the 5 days FIIP on data science based on the concepts of data analytics, natural language processing, data pre-processing, exploratory data analysis, neural networks with LSTM, GRU, and also today we have learned a hands-on session with that IBM, that is IBM Power System. So it's a great experience for us, and also my sincere thanks to SRM Research Director, SRM IST Convener, Organizer, and to Object Automation Software Solutions, Mr. Vaibhav sir, Mr. Madan sir, Sashank sir, and to Dr. Abhinandan sir. Hoping for these kind of more sessions in disruptive technologies in the near future, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. We have gained a lot of knowledge, and this is a need of the hour, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Welcome, sir. Nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
sir.
Bharanidharan sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam. Anybody else, sir? Ramasankar sir, you want to say anything, sir?
Very good afternoon, sir. I am Ramasankar Singh, ex-finance officer and subject matter expert in ITAI
Good
CMA
evening, sir.
Lucknow.
Good evening, sir. Welcome, sir. Good evening, sir. Yes, sir.
Actually, it is a new for me, and I want to be expert in AI, ML, and DL, and I learn a lot about that, and I want to be a data science. This
Very good, sir. Very
that
good, sir.
I
Very
have
good, sir.
learned a lot from this because I am learner. I can't say much question on that, but the really enjoying session. I have learned a lot. Thank a lot to the organizers and the team. Thank you.
Very good, sir. I am very happy about your learning interest and enthusiasm towards learning. Salute, sir.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
So actually, you have been motivating us for the past 5 days.
Yes, madam. Very good, madam. Madam, anybody else ask participants? Any other participants you want to say? Share your experience, kindly, please. Any other participants? Gayatri Devi Prasad, they are saying very nice session. Syamla ma'am,
Sir,
where are
we have regular faculties attending all the 5 days. I think one or two can give their feedback.
Yes, madam.
Dhanlakshmi ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Line illa padavanga. Yes. Okay, ma'am.
Prabha ma'am. Prabha ma'am, can you give a few words? Shiba Parimala ma'am. I think we are feeling shy to mute.
Yes, madam. But anyway, okay, ma'am. You say something, ma'am. Then all resource persons can
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, as we are coming to the end of the session, I would like to thank Sandhya, the Director of Object Automation, and Kamini, who were the backbone of this event. And I would like to thank all the speakers, Mr. Vaibhav, Mr. Madan, Mr. Shashank, and today Mr. Abhinandan, Dr. Abhinandan, as I should say. Thank you, sirs. And I thank each and every participant, Ramashankar sir, Bharanidharan sir, and all the regular. We have Mr. Ravindran from Maheshwari Engineering College. He had been participating regularly. And all other faculty members who had been regular participants for the past 5 days. Thank you for motivating us to keep the session alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Finally, I should thank our management for giving us this opportunity for conducting our faculty induction immersion program. Actually, this was planned for our department faculty, but since it is online, we thought we can go with all other faculty members also, so that everyone can get experience on AI and data science. And you will be getting the certificates from Object Automation. So this is a certificate from the company, and hope it will be useful for all of you. Thank you once again. Have a good day.
Ma'am, certificate ma'am. Someone
You will be getting the certificate in a week's time.
Okay. Ma'am, is there today any feedback, ma'am?
Yes, sir. We have posted the feedback. Participants can fill the feedback form, And the sessions videos, I'll request the company to forward it to you to your mail ID.
Yes, madam. Thank you. எல்லாத்துக்கும் thanks சொல்லுங்க மேம். மேம் that's all மேம். அவங்க முடிச்சிட்டாங்களா மேடம் ஆப்ஜெக்ட் ஆட்டோமேஷன்?
That's it. Yes, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes,
Coming
madam.
here online.
You may say anything, ma'am.
Let me thank you, the SRM team, for providing a good opportunity for us, sir.
Yes, madam.
Thank you, ma'am.
Really, thanks,
I
ma'am.
think-
Thanks for your support.
I think we have shared a good knowledge as you expected.
Sure, ma'am.
We look forward to work with you more, sir.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. With the support of you, we will conduct number of programs for student benefit as well as faculty members benefit, ma'am.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ramasankar sir, Bharatindran sir, and Dr. Abhinandan sir. Thanks for
Sir,
our
there is
session.
one request. Whenever you conduct a program, kindly intimate over email also. Sometime what is happening,
Yes, sir.
other source we may not view. Email is a better option, and
Yes, sir,
all
yes.
it should be sent to all the participants because they really live learning exposure and experience. Thanks a lot.
Sure, sir. We have a database. We collect a registration database. We'll send through this mail ID, sir.
Okay,
Thank
sir.
you so much,
Thanks a
sir.
lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you
So much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
If the participant had filled the feedback form, we can end the session.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.